That $3 million marina looked powerful until the water started leaving. When I found strangers pouring concrete on my private shoreline, I didn't yell. I watched. The HOA had built a $3 million marina on my lake, renamed it, fined me, and smiled like the deed didn't matter. But old land keeps old records, and mine had one thing they never asked about. Stay with me, and if you like stories where quiet people stand their ground, subscribe before the lake answers. Pull that sign out. This is HOA Lakefront now. That was the first thing I heard when I turned off the county road and saw 20 strangers standing on my ranch. I stopped my pickup 20 feet short of my own wooden gate, dust rolling past the hood, my coffee still warm in the cup holder. Beyond the fence, a yellow excavator was chewing into the east bank of Mercer Lake like it had been hired to erase my family one scoop at a time. Two men in orange vests were pouring wet concrete into forms along the shoreline. Another crew had survey flags stabbed every few yards through the sage and bunchgrass my father used to cut by hand. And at the center of it all stood Carolyn Briggs. Coral jacket, white hard hat, clipboard tucked under one arm like a judge's order. One of her contractors had my warning sign in both hands. The same sign I bolted to a cedar post 12 years ago, after my wife got tired of weekend boaters drifting too close to the spillway. Private property. No trespassing. Mercer Ranch water impoundment. He rocked it once, twice, then tore the whole post loose from the ground and tossed it into the bed of a work truck. I stepped out of my pickup. The sound of my boots on gravel got Carolyn's attention. She turned slowly, the way people do when they think the land under their feet has already chosen their side. "Mr. Mercer," she said, smiling like I had arrived late to her meeting. "We wondered when you'd show up. You're standing on my ranch." Her smile held. The board has already addressed that issue. Behind her, a concrete truck groaned as its chute swung toward a hole cut into my shoreline. Wet gray slurry dropped into the earth with a slap. I looked past Carolyn toward the lake. The morning sun was sitting clean on the water, bright enough to make the surface look almost untouched, but the bank below it was torn open. Tire tracks ran where my father's cattle trail used to be. A stack of lumber lay beside the old willow. Somebody had spray-painted orange arrows on rocks my daughter Maddie used to jump from when she was little. I felt heat rise in my chest, but I kept my hands loose. "What board?" I asked. "The Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association," Carolyn said. "As of last Thursday, Mercer Lake has been approved as a shared community waterfront amenity. The marina project is moving forward under county approval." She said Mercer Lake like the name annoyed her. A man in a branded polo walked behind her carrying rolled blueprints. On the top sheet I saw a title block, Briggs Landing Marina, Phase 1. I looked back at Carolyn. "That lake has my name on the deed." "Names change," she said. "Communities grow." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the alternative was grabbing that clipboard and throwing it into the concrete. "My father dammed this draw in 1964, I said. "He filed the water rights. He built the spillway. He set the first gauge post with his own hands. You don't get to rename it because your subdivision needs a brochure photo." Carolyn's eyes cooled behind her sunglasses. "Mr. Mercer, the county recognizes the public benefit of lake access. Our residents paid significant assessments for this improvement. $3 million to be exact. I suggest you don't interfere with permitted work." $3 million. I looked again at the shoreline, at the concrete forms, at the men moving like they had every legal right in the world. That number sat in the air heavier than the diesel smoke. $3 million of somebody else's money was being poured into land nobody had asked me to sell. "Show me the easement," I said. Carolyn had been waiting for that. She reached into a leather folder and pulled out a packet with the HOA logo stamped across the top. Gold seal, county stamp, clean paper, the kind of document designed to scare people who don't know what they're reading. She handed it to me with 2 fingers. Shared Lake Access Agreement, she said. Executed and reviewed. I opened it right there at the gate. The first signature was hers. Carolyn Briggs, HOA President. The second was Warren Briggs, County Development Review Officer, her husband. I knew that name from the campaign signs still nailed to fences along the highway. I flipped to the second page, then the third. My name wasn't there. No Mercer signature, no grantor signature, no court order, no recorded deed reference, no condemnation notice, nothing from anyone who had ever owned 1 inch of my ranch, just paper pretending to be power. I folded the packet once and held it at my side. Carolyn's smile sharpened. I trust that clears things up. No, I said. It clears up something else. Her head tilted. Excuse me? I looked over her shoulder as the concrete truck emptied another load into my shoreline. The workers kept moving. Nobody looked at me. That was the part that landed hardest. To them, I was not the owner. I was an inconvenience standing at the edge of a project already sold. A younger foreman walked up to Carolyn and said, "You want us to keep setting the east pylons?" Carolyn did not look away from me. Proceed. The foreman waved his arm. The pile driver coughed to life out on the floating barge. Steel hit timber. The sound cracked across the water and came back from the western ridge like a gunshot. That lake had been quiet my whole life. It watered cattle, held trout, and reflected the porch light on nights when my wife could not sleep. My father's ashes were scattered under the cottonwoods by the North Bend. My daughter learned to swim in the shallows where Carolyn's men had just dumped gravel. But I did not yell. People like Carolyn were hungry for yelling. They knew how to use it. A raised voice would become a threat. A step forward would become intimidation. A shove would become assault. I had spent enough years reading contracts, land maps, and water filings to know that anger feels good for about 10 seconds and costs you for months. So I let the pile driver pound. I let the concrete pour. I let Carolyn mistake my silence for defeat. Then I said, "You just built your first problem in wet concrete." For the first time, her smile moved. Not much, just enough. "Is that a threat?" "No, ma'am," I said. "That's a survey note." I walked back to my pickup, put the fake easement on the passenger seat, and drove the half-mile to my house without looking back. In the mirror, Carolyn was still standing at the gate, clipboard against her chest, watching me leave like she had won. The old ranch house was quiet when I got inside. I set the packet on the kitchen table beside my coffee and stood there for a moment, listening to the faint hammer of construction across the water. Every strike came through the walls like a hand knocking on a coffin. Then I went to my office. The steel file box sat in the bottom drawer of my father's desk, exactly where he left it. Gray metal, brass latch, a strip of masking tape on the lid, his handwriting faded but still readable. Mercer Water Rights, 1964. I put my hand on the latch and felt the anger settle into something colder. Carolyn Briggs had a $3 million marina, a fake easement, and a husband with a county stamp. I had the deed, the dam license, and the one thing nobody from that HOA had bothered to ask about. Who controlled the lake when the water had to move? The steel file box opened with a hard little click that sounded louder than it should have in that quiet office. I lifted the lid and smelled dust, old paper, and the faint oil my father used to rub into everything metal so it would outlive him. The top folder was exactly where I remembered it. Mercer Ranch Water Rights, 1964. Beneath it were county plats, dam inspection forms, irrigation filings, and a folded survey map with my father's pencil marks still running along the shoreline. I spread everything across the desk. The deed came first, 220 acres, Mercer Ranch, including the impounded surface water, dam embankment, eastern shoreline, western cattle slope, and spillway easement to Dry Creek. My father's name was on the old copy. Mine was on the transfer after he passed. The lake was not adjacent to my ranch. It was inside it. Then I pulled Carolyn's packet from my jacket and laid it beside the deed. That was when the insult sharpened. Her so-called shared lake access agreement had all the decoration of authority and none of the bones. HOA letterhead, a gold seal, a county review stamp, a notary block. The words public benefit appeared 4 times. Community amenity appeared 6. Mercer Lake appeared once, crossed out in one place and replaced with Briggs Landing Reservoir in a different font. But there was no grantor, no legal description matching my deed, no recorded instrument number, no signature from me, no signature from my father, no signature from any Mercer who had ever held that land. I took out a yellow legal pad and wrote one sentence at the top. A document cannot give what its signer does not own. I read the packet again, slower this time. Carolyn had signed as HOA president. Warren Briggs had signed as County Development Review Officer. The notary had stamped it. Someone had attached a site sketch showing the Marina footprint running across my east bank, my old dock, and a portion of the dam safety setback. They had not just misunderstood the boundary, they had drawn over it. My phone buzzed on the desk. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mr. Mercer?" Carolyn said. "I wanted to make sure you had time to review the agreement." I reviewed it. "Good. Then you understand the board has already acted. I understand you signed a paper granting yourself access to land you don't own." Silence moved across the line, short but real. Then her voice came back harder. "You should be careful with accusations. The county reviewed our application. Your husband reviewed it." "Warren is a county officer," she said. "His signature carries authority." "Not over my deed." She exhaled, like I was being difficult on purpose. "Mr. Mercer, the lake serves more than your personal nostalgia. 48 families purchased homes with the understanding that waterfront access would be part of this community. You cannot hold an entire neighborhood hostage because you dislike change." I looked at the old survey map, at my father's penciled line following the water's edge. "That lake waters my cattle," I said. "It feeds my lower pasture. It sits behind a private dam licensed under my name. It is not a swimming pool for your sales brochure. You're emotional." "No," I said. "I'm reading." She did not like that. "The HOA has retained counsel," she said. "If you obstruct construction, we will pursue all remedies available, including damages for delay. $3 million of work is underway. Every day you interfere will be documented." "Good," I said. "Document everything." The line went quiet again. "You really should attend the board meeting tonight," Carolyn said. 7 o'clock, Willow Creek Clubhouse. It would help if the residents heard your position directly. That was not an invitation. It was a stage. I knew what she wanted. Put the old rancher in a room full of angry homeowners who had already paid assessments. Let them stare at me like I was the man stealing their lake, not the man watching them build on mine. Get me mad. Get me loud. Get a recording. "I'll be there," I said. At 6:40, I drove toward Willow Creek Estates with copies of 3 documents in a manila folder. My deed, the dam license, and the 1964 water right filing. The subdivision gate was made of black iron and fake stone, with a bronze sign that said, "Luxury Ranch Living." Beyond it, the houses sat high on the ridge, all glass walls and sharp roof lines pointed toward my water. Their clubhouse was packed. Carolyn stood at the front beneath a framed rendering of the completed marina. Blue water, white boats, smiling families, a sunset that had never touched that side of the ridge. Warren Briggs sat at the board table in a navy sport coat, hands folded, face blank in the practiced way of a man used to being questioned carefully. Carolyn saw me and tapped the microphone. "Mr. Mercer has joined us," she said. "Perhaps now we can clear up this unfortunate resistance." 40 or 50 heads turned. I walked to the front slowly. I did not sit. Carolyn lifted her packet. "For the record, Mr. Mercer, do you deny receiving the shared access agreement?" "No." "Do you deny the county approved the marina?" "I deny that either one gives you ownership." A murmur moved through the room. Warren leaned toward his microphone. "The county determined the lake access served a legitimate community planning purpose." I looked at him. "Did the county determine that before or after you signed your wife's HOA agreement?" His jaw tightened. Carolyn stepped in fast. "This is exactly the hostility we've been dealing with," she said to the room. "Mr. Mercer has refused reasonable cooperation at every turn." I opened my folder and held up the deed. "This is the recorded deed to Mercer Ranch. The lake is inside the parcel. This is the state dam license. My name is on it. This is the original water right filing. My father's name is on it. If your HOA has a recorded easement, give me the instrument number." Nobody spoke. Carolyn smiled, but it no longer reached her eyes. "Legal interpretation is not that simple." "It is tonight," I said. "Where is the instrument number?" Warren looked down at his papers. That tiny movement told me more than any confession could have. Carolyn cleared her throat. "The board's position is that long-term community reliance and county approval create equitable access rights." "Equitable access is not a deed," I said, "and reliance on a lie does not turn it into land." The room changed then. Not in my favor. Not yet. But the certainty cracked. A man in the second row looked at his wife. A woman near the back lowered the Marina brochure in her lap. Someone whispered, "Do we actually own it?" Carolyn heard it too. Her face hardened. "Mr. Mercer," she said, voice sharp enough to cut through the room, "if you continue spreading confusion, the HOA will seek enforcement. You are exposing yourself to serious financial consequences." I put the copies on the board table, one by one. "Then enforce it," I said. "But from now on, every notice you send me, every worker you put on my land, every dollar you collect using my lake, becomes part of my record." I turned and walked out before she could answer. Outside, the air smelled like cut grass and hot asphalt. Behind the clubhouse windows, the room had erupted into low voices. Carolyn had wanted me cornered. Instead, she had made one mistake in front of witnesses. She had been asked for the one thing that mattered, and she did not have it. By morning, Carolyn Briggs had answered the only way people like her answer when the facts start turning against them. She sent paper. The first envelope was waiting in my mailbox before the construction crews even fired up their machines. Cream stationery. Gold HOA logo. My name spelled correctly, which somehow made it worse. Inside was a violation notice for unauthorized use of community waterway. $850 due in 7 days. I stood at the mailbox and read it twice. Community waterway. I looked over the fence toward the lake my father dammed, the lake my deed described, the lake my water license tied to my land. The pile driver coughed somewhere beyond the trees. A gull lifted off the far bank, circled once, and disappeared toward the ridge. I folded the notice and took it inside. The second envelope came 2 days later. Illegal private dock, $500. The dock in question was built by my father in 1978, repaired by me in 2009, and listed on my property insurance longer than Willow Creek Estates had existed. The third notice came that Friday. Non-compliant ranch gate, $300. The fourth accused my cattle of creating an odor nuisance near a future community amenity. I filed every one. I bought a black 3-ring binder from the feed store in town and wrote on the spine with a silver marker, Briggs HOA trespass record. Every envelope went into a plastic sleeve. Every postmark got circled. Every signature got copied. On the first page, I wrote the date Carolyn tore down my sign. The binder was still thin when Cal Ransom walked into my kitchen without knocking. Cal had lived on the south side of Mercer Lake for 30 years, on a 10-acre parcel that touched mine at the old cattle fence. 66 years old, retired lineman, hands like fence posts, patience like dry tinder. He came in carrying a yellow notice in one hand and a fury in both eyes. "They took my pontoon," he said. I set my coffee down. "When?" "This morning. 3 men and a flatbed. Said the Marina Association had impounded unregistered vessels." He slapped the notice on my table. I read it. Same gold logo, same fake authority. Release fee, $1,500. "They took mine too," I said. His face darkened. "Your Lund?" I nodded. That boat had belonged to my father. 14 feet of dented aluminum with green paint rubbed silver at the bow. Not worth much to a bank. Worth plenty to me. I had caught my first trout out of that boat. Maddie had fallen asleep in it at 5 years old with a life jacket under her chin. It had sat tied to my dock for decades without asking permission from anyone. Cal turned toward the door. "I'm going down there." "No." He stopped. "No. No. They stole our boats, Eli." "I know. They put them behind a fence like junkyard scrap. I know that too." His jaw worked. "Then why are you standing here drinking coffee?" "Because if you go down there angry, Carolyn gets what she needs. A confrontation. A threat. A reason to call Sheriff Pete Harlan and say 2 old ranchmen are interfering with a permitted project." Cal stared at me like I had slapped him. I slid the binder across the table and opened it to the first notice. Then the second. Then his. "Don't give her anger," I said. "Give her evidence." He looked at the sleeves, the dates, the postmarks. The fire in his face did not go out, but it changed direction. "You got a plan?" "I'm building one." We drove down to the east shoreline in my truck, slow enough that the dash camera caught every foot of the road. Carolyn's crews had installed a temporary chain-link pen near the half-built marina. Inside sat Cal's pontoon, my Lund, and a blue kayak I recognized from the Ellis place beyond the cottonwoods. Each had a yellow tag wired to it like livestock at an auction. Cal took one step toward the fence. I put a hand on his arm. "Pictures first." We filmed the boats from the public shoulder of my own ranch road. I narrated the date, time, location, and owners. Cal held up his notice beside the fence. I zoomed in on the padlock, the Marina logo, the tire tracks across my pasture, and the workers walking in and out like they were clocking into a job site. A foreman noticed us and came over. "You can't film here," he said. "I'm filming my property," I said. "This is an active HOA construction zone. This is Mercer Ranch." He pointed toward the road. "Mrs. Briggs said any interference gets reported." "Then report this," I said, holding up the binder. 2 boats taken from private docks, 1 fake fine, 1 illegal storage pen, all documented. The foreman glanced at Cal, then at the camera, and decided he had somewhere else to be. By noon, Carolyn called. I put her on speaker with Cal sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "Mr. Mercer," she said, already clipped and cold, "your behavior at the Marina site was reported." "Good. I was hoping someone was paying attention. You and Mr. Ransom are creating a hostile environment for contractors. You impounded private boats from private docks. Unregistered vessels within the Marina Improvement Zone are subject to removal under Policy 4.7. I'm not in your marina. You are adjacent to a community amenity." "No, Carolyn. You are trespassing on a private water impoundment." Cal leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, listening hard. Carolyn's voice dropped. You are making this harder on yourself than it needs to be. The board is prepared to be reasonable if you cooperate. Return the boats. That is no longer my decision. The Marina office has procedures. There is no Marina office. There will be, she said. That sentence told me enough. She was not defending what existed. She was forcing the future into place and daring the past to stop her. After she hung up, Cal sat quiet for a moment. You hear that? He said. I heard it. She already sold the slips. I closed the binder and looked out the kitchen window toward the lake. Beyond the cottonwoods, the pile driver started again. One strike, then another, then another. Then we need to know who bought them, I said. Cal tapped the yellow notice with one thick finger. And we need eyes where they don't expect them. I looked at him. He gave me a grim little smile. I've got trail cameras, 12 of them. Used them when the bears kept tearing up my apple trees. That was the first useful thing anyone had said all week. By evening, the binder had a new tab, Impounded Property. Under it, I filed the photos, the video transcript, Cal's notice, my notice, and a printed map marking the exact spot of the chain-link pen. Carolyn Briggs had moved from insult to theft, and now she had done it on camera. Cal brought the trail cameras over before sunrise in a plastic storage tub, each one wrapped in old towels and labeled with masking tape. He set them on my kitchen table beside the binder, like he was laying out tools for surgery. 12 cameras, he said. Motion triggered. Night vision. Date and timestamps if the batteries aren't dead. I checked the first one, then the second. They'll do. He gave me a look. You sound like a man who's done this before. I've had to prove water levels to insurance adjusters, county inspectors, and one neighbor who swore my cattle drank his irrigation ditch dry from half a mile away. Cameras tell the truth without raising their voice. By 7, we were moving through the cedar trees along the eastern bank. We mounted one camera on a fence post aimed at the chain-link boat pen. One went inside the old hayloft, pointed at the ranch road the crews had been using without permission. One sat under a split cedar limb with a clean view of the dam spillway. Another went in the rafters of the boat shed, watching the dock where my loon should have been. Every camera got a number. Every number went into the binder with its location, angle, battery date, and memory card label. Cal watched me write it all down. You really do document everything. My father used to say, land doesn't defend itself, paper does. At 9:18 that morning, camera 3 caught the first trespass. A white contractor pickup rolled through the lower pasture gate without stopping. 2 workers climbed out, pulled 3 orange survey stakes from the boundary line, and replaced them 50 feet deeper onto my land. One man took a photo. The other laughed and said something the microphone did not catch. At 10:42, camera 7 caught a skid steer dumping crushed gravel less than 30 yards from the dam spillway. At 11:06, camera 1 caught a Marina employee unlocking the chain-link pen and climbing into my loon. He sat in my father's boat, opened the storage bench, pulled out the old tackle box, and tossed it onto the ground like trash. Cal was standing beside me when I reviewed that footage on my laptop. His jaw tightened. You want me to go down there now? No. That tackle box was your dad's. I know. You're just going to watch? I'm going to save it. I copied the file to 2 drives, printed still frames, and added them to the binder under a new tab. Video evidence. My hands were steady, but I could feel something hard settling behind my ribs. There are insults a man can swallow because the law asks him to stay calm. Watching a stranger rifle through your father's boat is not one of them. I swallowed it anyway. That afternoon, Carolyn gave me the next piece herself. I saw the black SUVs first, 3 of them parked near the unfinished pavilion. Men in pressed shirts and clean boots stood along the shoreline with glossy folders in their hands. Investors, not residents. Carolyn was leading them down the gravel path, pointing across the lake like she had personally ordered the mountains into place. Camera 5 had a clean angle from the cedar grove. Her voice came through better than I expected. Once Phase 2 opens, we expect premium slips to generate 6 figures annually, Carolyn told them. The old rancher problem is being handled. He has sentimental attachments, but the county is with us. One of the investors asked, "And title?" Carolyn laughed softly. "We wouldn't be standing here if that were a concern." Cal muttered beside me, "She just sold your lake out loud." "No," I said, rewinding the clip. "She sold the lie." I played it again. The old rancher problem. That phrase did something to me I did not expect. Not because she called me old. I was 58, and honest mirrors exist. It was the way she said problem. Like my father's dam, my daughter's childhood, my wife's ashes under the cottonwoods, and every recorded acre of Mercer Ranch were nothing but a nuisance between her and a profit line. By 4 o'clock, I had enough. I called Nora Whitcomb. Nora was a water rights attorney in Bend, with a voice like dry gravel and a reputation for making county boards regret lazy paperwork. I had used her once, years back, when a hay operation tried to reroute runoff through my lower pasture. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Eli Mercer," she said. "Please tell me you're calling about irrigation and not litigation. I think they built a business on my father's lake." That got silence. Then Nora said, "Start from the beginning, but only the parts you can prove." I told her about Carolyn, the fake easement, Warren's county stamp, the fines, the boat impoundment, the cameras, the moved boundary stakes, the gravel near the spillway, and the investor tour. When I finished, Nora did not speak for several seconds. "Send me the deed," she said. "The dam license, the water filing, every notice, every video, and Eli? Yeah. Do not confront her again without me knowing first." That night, Cal and I sat at the kitchen table while files uploaded one by one. Outside, across the dark lake, the Marina lights glared through the cedars like a trespass that had learned to glow. My binder was no longer thin. And for the first time since Carolyn tore down my sign, the fight had moved off my shoreline and onto ground she did not control. Nora Whitcomb called me at 7:12 the next morning. "I read what you sent," she said. "Your deed is clean. Your water right is clean. Your dam license is clean. Their easement is garbage." I stood at the kitchen window, watching 2 construction trucks crawl along the East Bank Road like beetles crossing a wound. Then we stopped them. "Not yet," Nora said. That answer hit wrong. Not yet? If we run straight to court with trespass, they'll argue confusion, reliance, community benefit, and county approval. They'll muddy the water. I want to know how that county stamp landed on a fake easement before we swing. Through the glass, I saw a worker raise a board where the Marina arch would go. I could already picture Carolyn cutting a ribbon beneath it. "What do you need?" I asked. "Public records, permit applications, review notes, waivers, meeting minutes, contractor bids, conflict disclosures, anything Warren Briggs touched." By 9, I was at the county records office with a written request Nora had drafted. The clerk behind the counter, a gray-haired woman named Mrs. Dutton, read the first page, then the second. Her eyes paused on Warren's name. "You're asking for a lot, Mr. Mercer. I own the lake they're building on." She looked up over her glasses. "Not surprised. More like tired. I wondered when you'd come in." That sentence made the room feel smaller. "You knew about this?" "I know what crosses my counter." She lowered her voice. "I don't always know what should have crossed it." She stamped my request, made a copy, and slid the receipt to me. They have statutory time to respond, but some files are already public. Sit over there. She pointed to a terminal near the wall. For 3 hours, I pulled records. The Marina permit had been filed on a Monday and approved the following Monday. 6 business days. I knew enough about county review to know a shoreline project touching a licensed impoundment should not move that fast. There was no full environmental assessment. No public comment log. No dam safety referral. No notice to the listed water right holder. My name appeared once. Adjacent rural owner. Not property owner. Not dam operator. Not water right holder. Adjacent. I printed that page and felt my jaw lock. The waiver forms were worse. Each one had the same signature at the bottom. Warren Briggs, County Development Review Officer. Carolyn's husband had waived the environmental study, the hydrology review, and the extended comment period. He had also certified that the proposed work did not affect privately held water infrastructure. He had signed that line while standing one phone call away from the deed that proved otherwise. I called Nora from the parking lot. "It's Warren on every waiver," I said. "I expected 1 or 2, all of them." She went quiet. Then, "Bring copies." When I got home, a white envelope from the HOA was taped to my front gate. Not mailed, hand-delivered. The notice said I owed $12,400 in cumulative violations and administrative penalties. If unpaid, the HOA reserved the right to pursue liens against benefited shoreline property. Benefited shoreline property. They were already setting up the next lie. I took photos of the envelope before touching it. Then I put it in the binder. At 3:30, Nora arrived in a dust-covered Subaru with a briefcase and no patience for small talk. She spread my county printouts across the kitchen table, lining them up beside the fake easement, the fines, and the camera stills. "This," she said, tapping Warren's waiver signature, "is the hinge." The hinge? The thing the door swings on. If he approved a project on land his wife's HOA did not own, that is bad. If he approved it while connected to the contractor, that is something else entirely. Connected how? I don't know yet. She opened her laptop and began pulling corporate filings. High Desert Marine Works, the company listed on the county bid sheet, had been formed 8 months earlier. Its mailing address was a suite in Cheyenne. Its registered agent was a company that registered other companies. Clean. Too clean. Nora kept digging. A holding company owned part of High Desert. That holding company was managed by another LLC. That LLC listed a business address in Bend. Nora typed, searched, clicked, stopped. Her face changed. "What?" I asked. She turned the laptop toward me. The mailing address for the final LLC matched a cabin property owned by Warren Briggs before he married Carolyn. Nora leaned back. "There he is." Outside, across the lake, a crane lifted a beam into place. The metal swung over the water, slow and confident, like the whole world had already signed off. Nora printed the filing and added it to the table. "The HOA paid $3 million to build a marina on your land," she said, using approvals signed by Carolyn's husband, through a contractor tied back to Carolyn's husband. I looked at Warren's name on the waiver, then at Carolyn's signature on the fake easement. So it's not just trespass. "No," Nora said. "This is bigger than an HOA now." By sunset, the binder had a new tab, County Corruption. And for the first time, Carolyn Briggs was not the only person in my sights. Nora left just after dark with copies of the filings, the waivers, and the contractor records sealed in a red folder. Before she got into her Subaru, she looked back toward the glow of the marina lights across the water. "Eli," she said, "do not touch that construction site. Not one board, not one chain, Not one boat. Let them keep thinking this is about property lines. What is it about now? She tapped the red folder against her palm. Authority. And who actually has it? The next morning I called Russell Keene. Russell had inspected Mercer Lake twice when my father was still alive. He was a state dam safety inspector, old enough to remember paper maps, sharp enough to spot a bad embankment from a truck window. When I told him an HOA had driven pylons into the lake bed without consulting the licensed operator, he did not ask me if I was sure. He only said, "I'll be there at 10. Russell arrived in a state pickup with mud on the tires and a metal clipboard on the seat. He stepped out, shook my hand, and looked toward the east bank where the Marina frame now cut across the shoreline. "Your father would have hated that," he said. "He would have asked for permits first." Russell gave a dry half-smile. "Your father would have asked for permits while holding a shovel." We started at the dam. The old earthen embankment sat at the south end of the lake, grassed over and plain to anyone who did not understand what it held back. Russell walked slowly, touching the soil, checking the tow drain, kneeling near the spillway, measuring the freeboard against the gauge post my father had set in concrete. He did not waste words. Every time his pencil moved, my stomach tightened. Then we walked toward the marina. The closer we got, the worse his face looked. Concrete pylons stood in a line across the shallows, some less than 40 yards from the dam safety setback. The gravel ramp they had carved into the bank angled toward the spillway access road. A pile of rebar lay uncovered beside the water. One anchor cable ran exactly where the old inspection path used to be. Russell stopped at the first pylon and stared at the fresh concrete ring staining the lake bed. Who approved the soil report? There wasn't one in the file. He looked at me. Hydrology review? Waived. Dam safety referral? Not submitted. His jaw moved once. Who signed the waiver? Warren Briggs. Russell wrote that down. A worker in a yellow vest noticed us and came over fast. "You can't be here. This is an active construction area." Russell lifted his state ID without raising his voice. "Dam safety inspection." The man slowed. "Mrs. Briggs said all inspections go through the Marina office." Russell looked at the lake, then at the man. "Mrs. Briggs does not regulate dams." The worker backed off. We finished at the old pump house, a low block building half covered in vine maple. Inside, the iron outlet wheel sat in the dim light, red paint worn off the handle where my father's palm had turned it for decades. Russell checked the valve housing, the discharge line, the emergency outlet record plate. "This still operational?" "Yes." "Last test?" 14 months ago. Logged and witnessed." I handed him the maintenance book. He read the last 3 entries, then closed it with a firm hand. Outside, the pile driver started again. The vibration came through the ground, faint but real. Russell felt it too. He looked from the pump house to the marina and back to the dam. "That structure changes load, access, flow behavior, and inspection visibility," he said. "They built inside an active impoundment without the operator's review." "What does that mean?" "It means I have authority to require conditions that let me inspect what they affected." He went to his truck, pulled out a carbon form, and wrote for nearly 10 minutes. I stood by the tailgate, watching his pen turn Carolyn's confidence into state record. When he finished, he tore off the yellow copy and handed it to me. "Emergency partial drawdown authorized for structural inspection and safety review." My name was listed as licensed operator. Mercer Lake was listed as private impoundment. The order allowed me to lower the lake under state supervision if required to inspect the bed, pylons, embankment, and spillway approach. Russell tapped the bottom line with his finger. State safety law outranks every HOA rule they ever wrote. For the first time in weeks, I felt the fight shift under my boots. Carolyn had a fake easement. Warren had a county stamp. I had a signed state order and the key to the pump house. Across the water, men kept building Carolyn's Marina, every hammer strike confident, every board set like the lake belonged to them. They still did not understand. The lake was not just scenery, it was infrastructure. And infrastructure answers to the person licensed to keep it safe. Carolyn must have learned about Russell Keene's inspection before sunset, because the next morning, Sheriff Pete Harlan's cruiser rolled up my driveway with no lights on and trouble sitting in the passenger seat. Pete had been sheriff long enough to know when a complaint smelled political. He stepped out holding a folder, his hat low over his eyes, and looked past me toward the lake. "Eli," he said, "I need to ask you about an incident at the Marina site." I leaned against the porch rail. "Which one? The trespass? The stolen boats? Or the unpermitted pylons?" His mouth twitched, but he did not smile. "Carolyn Briggs filed a harassment complaint. Says you followed workers, threatened contractors, and tried to intimidate her board members." I let that sit for one full breath. "Did she mention the 12 cameras?" Pete looked up. "Cameras?" I brought him inside and opened the laptop at the kitchen table. Cal had already dropped off fresh memory cards that morning. I played the clips in order. Workers moving boundary stakes, men entering the boat pen, Carolyn's investor speech, me standing on the road filming, hands visible, Cal beside me, nobody shouting. Pete watched without interrupting. When the last clip ended, he closed Carolyn's complaint folder and set it on the table like it had lost weight. "I'll note that you provided footage contradicting her statement," he said. "Do more than note it." He met my eyes. I slid the binder toward him. "She is using your office as pressure. Warren is using the county stamp. They're trying to make me react before Nora can get this into court." Pete opened the binder. He saw the fines first, then the fake easement, then the county waivers. When he reached the contractor filing tied to Warren, his face changed. "Where did you get this?" "Public records." "Nora has this too?" "All of it." Pete closed the binder carefully. "Then keep doing exactly what you're doing. Don't step over a line. Don't give them a clean complaint." Before he left, he paused by the truck. "Eli, Carolyn called my office 3 times this morning, asking if I'd warned you off the Marina. And I told her I don't warn landowners off their own land unless a judge tells me to. That should have been the day's pressure. It wasn't." At 2:17 that afternoon, a certified letter arrived in a county envelope. Heavy paper, official seal, my name typed in block letters. I signed for it at the gate. Inside was a notice from the County Development Review Office, signed by Warren Briggs. It stated that my dam license and water control authority were subject to administrative review due to alleged unsafe operation, community impact concerns, and potential obstruction of approved development. Pending review, it advised me not to alter lake levels, interfere with marina access, or conduct any drawdown that could affect HOA improvements. I read the letter twice at the kitchen table, then a third time. There was no statute cited that gave Warren that power. No emergency finding, no state dam safety reference, no engineering report. Just a threat dressed up in county language. He had made one mistake. He put it in writing. I scanned it and sent it to Nora with the subject line, "Warren just threatened the dam license." She called back in less than 5 minutes. "Do not answer him," she said. "I wasn't planning to. This is witness intimidation by paper. He knows we're building a corruption file, and now he's using his public office to scare you off a state-authorized inspection. So what happens? I'm forwarding this to state investigators with the contractor records and Carolyn's fake easement. This letter just stepped them from civil trespass into public corruption. I looked out the window. Across the lake, workers were hanging string lights around the pavilion frame. A banner had gone up over the half-built arch. Grand opening, Briggs Landing. Marina. Nora kept talking. Eli, listen to me carefully. They're going to push harder now. People like Carolyn and Warren don't back down when they feel cornered. They try to make the paper taller than the truth. They can try. No, she said. They already are. That evening, Cal came over and found me in the pump house. I had not touched the valve. I was just standing there with Warren's letter folded in my back pocket, looking at the old iron wheel. Cal leaned against the doorway. You thinking about turning it? I'm thinking about my father. What would he do? I looked at the wheel, then at the state order sitting on the workbench. He'd wait until everything was legal. Cal nodded. And then? Outside, the marina lights flickered on across the water, bright and arrogant in the early dark. And then, I said, he'd let the lake answer. The grand opening announcement arrived the next morning in my mailbox, folded inside a glossy flyer I had not asked for. Briggs Landing, Marina. Private ribbon cutting. Saturday at 9. Catered breakfast, investor tour, homeowner reception, county remarks, and lakeside photography. My lake was on the front of it. Not a sketch, a drone photo. My water, my dam, my West Ridge catching the morning sun. They had edited out my old dock and darkened the image enough to make the shoreline look untouched. Cal stood beside me at the kitchen table and read over my shoulder. They're really throwing a party on stolen land. No, I said, setting the flyer into the binder. They're throwing a party on evidence. By noon, Nora had the flyer. By 2, Russell Keene had confirmed the state drawdown order was still active. By 4, Sheriff Pete Harlan had agreed to have a deputy near the Marina Road Saturday morning, not to stop anything, just to witness if Carolyn tried to turn a legal inspection into a criminal complaint. Then I made the calls that mattered. First to Owen Miles, the downstream rancher whose lower pasture caught the spillway creek. I told him the lake would be lowered under a state safety order, likely overnight Friday into Saturday. He asked how much water. Enough to expose the pylons. There was a pause. Then he chuckled once. I'll move the cattle. Next, I called Maddie in Boise. She answered between classes, rushed at first, then quiet when she heard my voice change. I told her about Carolyn, Warren, the fake easement, the fines, the stolen boats, the state order. I told her I was going to lower the lake her grandfather built. For a few seconds, all I heard was campus noise on her end. Voices, traffic, a door closing. Then she said, Dad, is it legal? Yes. Is it safe? Yes. Then do it. That was all I needed from her. Friday came slow. Carolyn's crews spent the day polishing the lie. They hung white ribbon from the pavilion posts. They set up folding tables under the arch. They parked a refrigerated catering truck near the gravel ramp and strung small lights along the dock railing. By late afternoon, the marina looked ready for a magazine spread. I spent the same hours doing what the state order required. I photographed the water gauge. I filmed the dam embankment. I logged the weather, the downstream notification, the time, the expected flow, and the outlet condition. Russell came by at dusk, reviewed the checklist, signed the inspection log, and stood with me at the pump house door. You understand, he said. This is going to make noise without making much sound. I know. People will call it revenge. It's an inspection. He nodded. Then keep it clean. After he left, I waited until the last marina truck rolled out. Across the water, the pavilion lights glowed empty. The dock sat still and proud, its reflection stretching across the lake like nothing beneath it could ever change. At 8:43 p.m., I walked into the pump house. The air inside smelled of cold metal and old concrete. The iron wheel stood against the wall, red paint worn to bare steel at the grip. My father had made me turn it once when I was 16, just enough to know its weight. He told me then that a man does not control water by force. He controls it by respecting where it wants to go. I set the state order on the workbench. I set Warren's threat letter beside it. Then I opened the inspection log and wrote the time. 8:47 p.m. Emergency partial drawdown initiated for structural inspection. I unlocked the safety chain. The wheel resisted the first turn, then gave with a low iron groan. I turned it slowly, one spoke at a time. Beneath the floor, the outlet pipe knocked once as pressure shifted. Then came the sound. Not a roar, not a crack. A deep, steady pull, like the lake had taken a breath and decided to leave. Water moved through the outlet and down into the spillway channel, legal, measured, and mine to release under state authority. I stepped outside and watched the creek below the dam begin to shine in the moonlight. Cal arrived 10 minutes later and stood beside me without speaking. He looked toward the marina, then back at the pump house. "How long?" "By dawn, enough." He nodded. "You all right?" I looked at the lake. Its surface still looked whole. That was the strange part. From a distance, nothing had changed yet. But under it, everything had. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. Cal glanced at me. I meant it. Anger had carried me to the file box. Evidence had carried me to Nora. The state order had carried me to the wheel. What I felt now was colder and cleaner than anger. Consequence. At midnight, the gauge was down 2 feet. At 2 in the morning, 4.5. At 4, the first mud flats appeared along the east bank, black and slick under the dock lights. By then, I was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee gone cold and the binder open in front of me. The marina would still be standing at sunrise, but the lake underneath it would not. At 6:18 a.m., I walked down from the house with the binder under one arm and the state order in a plastic sleeve. Cal was already waiting by the lower gate, hands in his jacket pockets, looking toward the east bank. He did not say anything at first. He did not have to. Mercer Lake had pulled back from the shoreline like it wanted no part of what they had built. The waterline sat far below the dock. Black mud stretched across the basin in wide, wet sheets, shining under the first hard light of morning. Carolyn's marina hung above it, crooked and useless, its floating sections dangling from guideposts that no longer touched water. The boats were worse. 12 of them had been left tied in their slips overnight for the grand opening. A white wake boat leaned on its side with its prop buried in silt. A pontoon sat nose down like a broken porch. A base boat rested in the mud beneath the dock, its cover collapsed and slick with algae. My Lund was still locked in the chain-link pen, safe from the mud because they had stolen it before the water moved. Cal stared at the exposed pylons. Look at that. The concrete footings were visible now, gray against the black lake bed. Some were shallow, some were cracked. 2 leaned slightly toward the spillway, their rebar showing at the edge like bones through skin. At 7:05, Maya Ellison arrived. She was the reporter from the county paper, young but sharp, with a camera bag over one shoulder and a photographer climbing out behind her. I had called her the night before and told her there might be a public safety inspection worth documenting. I did not tell her what she would see. She stopped at the gate and looked over the basin. "Oh my God," she said. "No," Cal said, "just gravity." Sheriff Pete Harlan arrived 15 minutes later with one deputy. He parked near the ranch road, stepped out, took one look at the marina, and let out a low breath. "You kept it legal?" he asked. I handed him the state order, the downstream notification log, and the gauge record. He read them carefully. All right. At 8:12, the first guest arrived in a silver SUV, then another, then 5 more. Men in clean boots, women in wool coats, homeowners carrying coffee cups, investors with folders tucked under their arms. They came over the rise smiling, ready for ribbon photos and sparkling water. One by one they stopped. The catered breakfast truck rolled in and parked beside the pavilion. A man climbed out carrying a tray of covered dishes, saw the mud, and walked back to the cab without unloading. The string quartet stood under the arch with their instrument cases closed. Nobody told them to play. By 8:40, the gravel lot was full and silent. Then Carolyn arrived. Her white Range Rover came fast up the Marina road, dust trailing behind it. She stepped out in a cream blazer, hair set, gold scissors in one hand for the ribbon cutting. Warren followed from the passenger side, wearing a navy sport coat and the confident face of a man who thought paperwork could outrun physics. Carolyn walked halfway to the pavilion before she saw the lake. She stopped so suddenly Warren almost bumped into her. For 10 seconds, she just stared. The Marina arch stood above her with Briggs and an landing. Marina burned into cedar. Beneath it, the lake bed steamed in the cold morning air. The dock hung above mud. The boats sat ruined. The cracked pylons told the story her permits had buried. Then she turned and saw me at the gate. "What did you do?" she shouted. Every face turned. She crossed the gravel fast, her boots slipping once near the mud line. Warren followed, already looking at Pete, already calculating which office might still protect him. Carolyn pointed at me with the gold scissors still in her hand. "What did you do to our lake?" I did not move. "Mrs. Briggs," I said. I lowered my lake under a state safety order. "Your Marina just told the truth." Her mouth opened, but no words came out right away. Russell Keene stepped from behind Pete's cruiser. He had arrived quietly, state truck parked near the road, clipboard in hand. "The drawdown was authorized," Russell said. "This impoundment is under active safety inspection. The structures visible in that basin appear to have been installed without dam safety review." Carolyn swung on him. "You can't do this during our event." Russell looked toward the mud. "Ma'am, water does not follow your event schedule." A few homeowners murmured. One man near the arch said, "Wait, this isn't HOA property?" Nora Whitcomb arrived as that question hit the crowd. She stepped out of her Subaru with a court packet, walked straight to Pete, and handed him copies of the deed, the fake easement, the county waivers, and the contractor filings. Warren saw the red folder and went pale. Carolyn tried to recover. "This is sabotage. He destroyed community assets." Nora turned to face the crowd. "An HOA vote does not transfer a deed. A county stamp does not create ownership. And a public official cannot approve his wife's project on private land through a contractor tied to his own holding company." The silence after that was different. Not confusion. Recognition. Maya's photographer kept shooting. The camera clicked through the stillness. Carolyn with the gold scissors. Warren frozen beside her. The Marina above mud. The state order in my hand. Then 2 dark state investigator vehicles rolled into the gravel lot. Carolyn looked at them, then at Warren. For the first time since this started, she looked afraid. The state investigators did not run. They did not shout. They stepped out of their vehicles in dark jackets, carrying folders, and walked across the gravel like they already knew where every document would lead. One of them spoke first. "Warren Briggs?" Warren straightened, but the color had drained out of his face. "I'm Warren Briggs, County Development Review. We need to speak with you regarding permit waivers issued for the Briggs Landing Marina project. high desert marine works, and potential conflict of interest violations. Carolyn cut in fast. "This is a private HOA matter," Nora answered before the investigator had to. "No, Mrs. Briggs, it stopped being private when your husband used a county office to approve your project on land you didn't own." A murmur moved through the crowd. Homeowners who had arrived expecting champagne now stood in the mud smell, holding glossy programs for a marina that hung useless above a drained lake. One man looked down at his invitation, then at Carolyn, and folded it in half. Warren tried to step toward his Range Rover. Sheriff Pete Harlan moved once, just enough to block the path. "Stay available, Warren." That small sentence landed harder than a shout. Carolyn turned on me then, not with confidence anymore, but with panic wearing its old clothes. "You ruined these people. You drained the lake to humiliate us." I held up the state order. "No. You humiliated them when you sold access to water you never owned." Maya Ellison's photographer caught that moment too. Carolyn in her cream blazer. Warren boxed in by Pete and the investigators. Me holding the paper. Behind us, 36 empty slips hanging over black mud. The story ran the next morning. Not as a rumor, not as a Facebook post. Front page. Private lake drawn down. HOA Marina exposed in permit scandal. By Monday, Nora filed for an emergency injunction. By Wednesday, a judge ordered all marina operations stopped. By Friday, the court recognized what the deed had said all along. Mercer Lake was private property inside Mercer Ranch, not a Willow Creek amenity, not Briggs Landing Reservoir, not community shoreline. The HOA was ordered to remove all unauthorized structures at its own expense. The insurance carrier denied coverage after reviewing the fraudulent permits. High Desert Marine Works suspended operations. Warren resigned from the County Development Board 2 weeks later. Carolyn was removed by an emergency vote of her own homeowners after they learned their special assessments had funded a project tied to her husband's hidden company. There were charges. There were hearings. There were lawyers in clean suits asking careful questions about signatures, waivers, shell companies, and why my name had been reduced to adjacent rural owner on a permit file for my own lake. I testified once. Nora told me to answer only what was asked. I did. Yes, I owned the lake. Yes, I held the dam license. Yes, the HOA built without my consent. Yes, the drawdown was authorized by the state. No, I never gave Carolyn Briggs permission to rename my father's water. The courtroom was quiet after that one. Carolyn did not go to prison, but she paid. Restitution, civil penalties, a permanent ban from serving as an officer in any homeowners association tied to Willow Creek or any successor board. Warren faced separate charges for abuse of office and failure to disclose financial interest. The homeowners got partial reimbursement, not enough to make them whole, but enough to show the court understood who had been lied to. The marina came down in pieces. For 6 weeks, crews removed warped decking, cracked footings, broken guideposts, and the arch that had said Briggs Landing Marina. I kept the old private property sign they had torn down on the first day. I put it back up at the gate with new bolts and a steel backing plate. Mercer Lake refilled slowly. Snowmelt came first, thin and silver through the draw. Then spring water pushed through the inlet. By April, the mudflats were gone. By May, the gauge touched the mark my father had carved into the post with a pocket knife in 1964. The lake looked whole again, but not the same. Maybe I wasn't either. Some of the Willow Creek homeowners came to apologize. Not Carolyn's friends, not the ones who had shouted at the board meeting. Regular people. Families who had believed the brochure, paid the assessment, and trusted the wrong woman with a clipboard. They came in 2s and 3s, stopping at the gate, hats in their hands, eyes lowered. I shook every hand. I did not open the lake to the HOA, but I did not close it to decency either. That summer, Maddie came home from Boise for 3 weeks. She sat at the kitchen table with me, Cal, Nora, and Russell while we drew up a new plan. Not a marina, not a membership, not a private club pretending to be a community. A free Saturday fishing program for local kids. Maddie named it Mercer Water Days. Cal fixed my father's old Lund and painted the name on the side in blue letters. Russell helped mark safe areas near the dam. Nora wrote the liability forms so clean even she smiled at them. Sheriff Pete Harlan sent 2 deputies the first weekend, not because we expected trouble, but because he said kids with fishing rods deserved a quiet morning. The first Saturday in June, 24 children showed up. One little girl in pink rubber boots caught a bluegill off the restored dock and screamed like she had hooked a whale. Cal laughed so hard he had to sit down. Maddie stood beside me, her hand wrapped around mine, watching the water shine behind the cottonwoods. I thought about Carolyn then. Not with hate. Hate takes too much room. Carolyn thought power was a board vote, a county stamp, and enough money poured into wet concrete. My father taught me different. Power is a deed kept safe in a steel box. Power is a water right recorded before the people yelling at you were born. Power is a binder full of evidence, a lawyer who reads closely, a sheriff who checks the facts, and the patience to let the truth rise back like water. By the end of summer, the lake was quiet again, not empty, not stolen, not renamed.
Just a lake under the western sun, haunting sky, scattered water on memories, and transit for kids who learn that no clipboard outrage on land. And maybe that is the lesson here. When somebody comes at you with loud words, fancy paper, and a title they think makes them untouchable, the answer is not always to shout back. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is stay calm, keep the record, read the 5 rings, and let the chill stand on each outfit. Ellie did not protect that lake by losing his temper. He protected it with a deed, a license, a pile full of evidence, and the passion his father taught him. There is dignity in that. There is strength in knowing what belongs to you and handling it the right way. Not every fight needs noise. Some fights are won by steady hand, clean paperwork, and neighbors who finally see the truth when it's mattered. If you have ever had to stand your ground against an HOA, a developer, or anyone who thought they could push past what was right, type yes in the comments. And if the story reminded you of something you have lived through, say where you are watching from. I read those stories, and I know a lot of folks here to do. And if you want more stories about rangeland, quiet courage, and people standing up the legal way, go ahead and subscribe. I will see you in the next one.